All right, here we go. Algebra 2, Unit 7, Day 3, Long in Synthetic Division. There is a lot of writing to be done with this, so I will not be using this worksheet today. I'll be using separate sheets of paper to help us get through this so that I can write a little bit bigger and hopefully it stands out a little bit more. Now, if we're going to divide this polynomial, that polynomial, this polynomial divided by that polynomial, this is how you need to write it. Notice the pattern. We take the first parenthesis, that goes in our division symbol, and then that second parenthesis is going to go on the outside of the division symbol. And really, for the most part, this is no longer needed, but I'll keep it here for this problem. Okay, here's how you can begin these problems. Take whatever the first term is here, and I'm going to write it out to the side, and I'm going to divide that by the first term here. X squared divided by x is simply x. Now, whatever the result is, I'm going to write it up here. Now, what I'm going to do with this is I'm going to take what I've just written and I'm going to multiply it by both of these terms. So x times x is x squared. That goes here. X times 6 is positive 6x. Now that I've done that, I'm going to underline what I've just written, wrap it in parentheses, and put a negative on the outside of those parentheses. Now, if you remember how to do long division, which is what they wanted you to do here, but I didn't feel the need to go over it, this makes sense. If not, talk to me at some point and I'll show you why. Okay, now if I distribute this negative throughout the parentheses, that's now negative and that's now negative. So here's what we're left with. X squared minus x squared, those cancel. 5x minus 6x is negative x. And now I'm going to bring down this. Now we're going to repeat the steps over again. This time, this is our first term. And I'm going to divide it by that first term. Negative x divided by x is negative 1. I'm going to take that result and write it here. Now I'm going to take what I just wrote down, the minus 1, and multiply it by these here. Negative 1 times x is negative x. Negative 1 times 6 is negative 6. Underline, wrap, negative. And if you distribute this negative throughout the parentheses, all these are now positive. Negative x plus x, those cancel. Negative 6 plus 6 is 0. We do not have a remainder. There's nothing remaining in this problem. We are finished. So our final answer is x minus 1. Now, I guess you could write that here if you wanted to. That is our answer, x minus 1. So what are the factors of this here? Well, one of them is x minus 1. And the other one was what we divided the problem by, x plus 6. Okay, now example B. I'm going to section off some space from here. All right, let's begin with this first term, x cubed. We're going to divide that by this first term here. And that gives us x squared. We're going to take that result and write it here. Now we're going to multiply this, what we just wrote down, by these two terms. X squared times x is x cubed. X squared times negative 3 is negative 3x squared. We're going to underline that, wrap it in parentheses, put a negative out in front, and now if you distribute the negative here and there, all the signs change. These two cancel. X squared plus 3x squared is 4x squared. And I'm going to drop down what's remaining. And I just like dropping down one thing at a time. You could drop down the minus 12, but I'm not going to worry about that right now. Okay, now let's start over. Here, our first term is now 4x squared. And we're going to divide that by the first term here, which gives us 4x. positive 4x. So let's write that here. Now, what we just wrote down, we're going to multiply by this binomial. 4x times x is 4x squared. 4x times negative 3 is negative 12x. Underline, wrap, negative. And now if you distribute the negative throughout the parentheses, all the signs change. These cancel. Negative 8x plus 12x, that's 4x. And I still have something over here, so let's drop that down. All right, now let's start it over. Our first term now is 4x. Divide that by the first term here. That gives us 4. Positive 4. Now let's multiply 4 times x. 4 times negative 3. Underline, wrap, negative. If you distribute the negative throughout the parentheses, everything changes. And also, everything cancels. No remainder left over. There's nothing remaining to be dropped down. We're finished. So, x cubed plus x squared, whatever. Your answer is x squared plus 4x plus 4. There are two methods of division that we're going to learn today. The one that you have learned already is long polynomial division. But truth be told, there's another way that we could have solved those problems. We could have used synthetic division. And honestly, it would have been much, much easier and much, much faster. But we need to learn long polynomial division because sometimes it will be easier to use long polynomial division than it will be for synthetic. And this is that example. If you see an example like this, you want to use long polynomial division. Now, here's the giveaway. We have a coefficient in front of x. All the other ones we did not. If I could have used synthetic division there, if it was not in the instructions here to use long polynomial division, I would have used synthetic division every time, but not here. This is where you want to use long polynomial division. Now this one, there's a lot going on, so I need to create myself some extra space here. Right. Let me section this off. And now we're going to begin our process. Let's take that term in front. And we're going to divide it by the first term there. That gives us x cubed. We're now going to take what we wrote down and multiply it by this binomial. 2x cubed times 2x is 2x to the fourth. X cubed times 1 is just x cubed. Okay, now we're going to underline our work, wrap it in parentheses, and put a negative out in front. If you distribute the negative throughout the parentheses, these cancel, which is usually the case. There's about every time we've done these. Now here, these also cancel, meaning we're left with 0x cubed. We haven't seen anything like this yet. So what we want to do is what we've been doing up to this point. Let's just bring this down here. Now, if we took this first term here and divided it by the first term there, well, 0 divided by anything is just going to give us 0. So we don't need to worry about this one. What we're now going to do is we're going to drop down plus 9x. So since we didn't have a result here, we had 0. Let's now begin the process here. negative 2x squared divided by 2x, which gives us negative x. So that's what we're going to write up here. And then multiply negative x times negative x times 2x is negative 2x squared. Negative x times 1 is negative x. Underline, wrap, negative. If you distribute the negative throughout the parentheses, everything changes. Those cancel. 9x plus x is 10x. Let's drop down that 5. We're now going to take the first term here, which is 10x. Divide that by the first term here, which is going to give us a result of 5. And now let's multiply 5 times 2x, 5 times 1. Underline, wrap, negative. Distribute the negative throughout the parentheses. All the signs flip. Everything cancels. We have a remainder of 0 with nothing left to bring down. So we are finished. This is our answer. X cubed minus x plus 5. Okay, we're going to do some skipping around here. Go ahead and take a look at example G, which is this one right here. We've gone over long polynomial division. Let's now do synthetic division. So this is the problem that it gave you right here. Notice how you want to set it up. We're going to take this front parenthesis here, and it goes in our division symbol, but it's upside down. Now, where did the 3 come from? Whatever we're dividing by, in this case, x minus 3, that's a factor. If you set it equal to 0 and solve, we get x equals 3. That's where the 3 came from. Okay. Now, the way that you begin this process is, this is the way I like to do it, by the way. Whatever the first coefficient is, in this case, it's 1. The number in front of x cubed is 1. Whatever that is, bring it down. Don't change it. Okay, now we're going to take what we just dropped down and we're going to multiply it by that 3 there. 3 times 1 is 3. Now here, we are going to worry just about our numbers. Don't worry about the letters just yet. This had a coefficient of 1. That's positive. Here, we have a number of 3. That's positive. Add them together. 1 plus 3 is 4. We're going to drop that down. Whatever we've dropped down, we now multiply. 3 times 4 is 12. That goes here. And we're not worried about the letters yet. We're just worried about the numbers. This is a negative 8. This is a positive 12. Negative 8 plus 12, that's 4. That's what we drop down. Now we multiply. 4 times 3 is 12. This is a negative 12. This is a positive 12. Negative 12 plus 12 is 0. Meaning that's our remainder. We have a remainder of 0. We're done. Now, what about our letters here? Here's what we're going to do with those. All of these variables, we need to include them in our final answer, but they decrease by 1 exponent. And if this decreased by 1 exponent, that means there's not an x there anymore. Now, all these are positive. So if we wrote our final answer, it would be this: x squared plus 4x plus 4 And we don't need the plus 0, do we? That is your final answer. Example H. I'll give you a little bit of time to set this problem up in a manner that we can solve it. This goes in here, x plus 2. If you set that equal to 0 and solve, you'd get -2. That's where the -2 comes from. Okay, let's do it. First step, whatever the leading coefficient is, drop it down, don't change it. It's a 1. Now we multiply. -2 times 1 is -2. Now we add 4 plus -2 is 2. Now we multiply. 2 times -2 is -4. Now we add -5 plus -4 is -9. And now we multiply. -9 times -2 is +18. And now we add 3 plus 18 is 21. This is the first time we've had a remainder that's not 0. So our answer is going to look a little bit different than normal. Okay, we've got all our numbers. We now need our variables. So x cubed becomes x squared. X squared becomes x. And that x is no longer needed. Now let's put this x squared, that's positive. This 2x, that's positive. So we need to mark that as positive. 9, that was negative. We already did that. That 21 is positive. So let's put positive there. Okay, now remember, this is our final answer. It's x squared plus 2x minus 9. Here we have a remainder, though, of plus 21. If you have a remainder, you put that over the factor that you had to divide by, which was x plus 2. So anytime you have a remainder, do the remainder over whatever the factor it is that you used to divide the problem. All right, example I, whatever the first number is, bring it down. Don't change it. Now we multiply. -3 times 2 is -6. Now you add 4 plus -6 is -2. Multiply. -2 times -3, that's +6. Now add these together. -3 plus 6, that's +3. Now we multiply. 3 times -3 is -9. Now we add. -6 plus -9 is -15. We're now going to bring down our variables. X cubed, that becomes x squared. X squared, that becomes x. And x, we no longer have a variable in that spot. This was our remainder, remember? And we're going to put that over, what was the factor it gave us? X plus 3. And now we have our final answer. All right, example J. It says work the following problem using both methods. No, thank you, because that just takes too much time. We're going to solve this problem using synthetic division, however. And now notice what's different with this problem. This is the first example that we have gone over where they're missing some very important information. The highest exponent that we see in the given problem is x to the 4th. No matter what the highest exponent they give you, you must have a exponential representative in descending order. So here's what I mean. If they've given us an x to the 4th, and that's our highest power, then we have to have an x cubed, which they did not give us in the given problem. So we have to account for the fact that we have 0x cubed. It gave us a -3x squared, so we wrote -3x squared. It did not give us a regular x, so we have to write plus 0x. It then gave us our constant of -18, so that's how we end -18. Since we're dividing by x minus 2, and we're using synthetic division, we want to divide by +2. And now we begin factoring. Factoring, what am I saying? Dividing. Okay, bring down the first number, don't change it. Multiply. 2 times 1 is 2. Now we add. 0 plus 2 is 2. Now we multiply. 2 times 2, that's 4. Now we add. Negative 3 plus 4 is positive 1. Multiply. 1 times 2 is 2. Now we add. 0 plus 2 is 2. Multiply. 2 times 2 is 4. Add. Negative 18 plus 4 is negative 14. We're now going to bring down all our variables and decrease by one exponent. Anything that is positive, I want to note the fact that it's positive. This was our remainder, so we need to put that over the factor that we used to divide. And there is your final answer. All right, looking at example K. So if we know x plus 2 is a factor, we can use division to factor 3x cubed plus 8x squared plus 3x minus 2 completely. We know that x plus 2 is a factor. So I'm going to use synthetic division here, and I'm going to start dividing. Whatever the first number is, don't change it. Now we multiply. 3 times negative 2, negative 6. 8 plus negative 6 is 2. Now we multiply. 2 times negative 2 is negative 4. Now we add. 3 plus negative 4 is negative 1. And now we multiply. Negative 1 times negative 2 is 2. Oh, good. We have a remainder of 0. If you have a remainder of 0, what that means is the factor that it gave you to divide by is a factor of the given polynomial. Okay, now we're going to bring down our variables, decrease by one exponent, and anything that's positive, let's note the fact that it's positive. Now, here's what we can also do. This tells us to factor completely. So once you have your results, yeah, that's our answer. That's our quotient. But if it wants us to factor completely, that means we can do some more work. We're going to have to factor this. Number in front times number in back. A times C, which is negative 3. These are the factors of 3. Now we have the factors of negative 3 that can subtract to get positive 2. Negative 1 times 3 is negative 3. 3 minus 1 is 2. Now we're going to group. Okay, here we have group 1 and group 2. Out of group 1, we can factor out a 3x, leaving us with x plus 1. Out of group 2, we can factor out a negative 1, leaving us with x plus 1. Okay, so now we have factored completely. The factors of this polynomial are 3x minus 1, x plus 1, and also x plus 2. It gave us the original factor right there. So we want to make sure and include that in our final answer. All right, we're going to end by doing example M. It has given us a polynomial, and it says f of negative 10 equals 0. So what that means is we want to use negative 10 to help us with our division. All right, once you have everything set up, we're going to start doing our synthetic division. Whatever the first number is, bring it down, don't change it. And now multiply. Negative 10 times 1 is negative 10. And now add. 6 plus negative 10 is negative 4. Multiply. Negative 4 times negative 10 is positive 40. Now we're going to add. Negative 45 plus 40. That's negative 5. Now multiply. Negative 5 times negative 10 is positive 50. Those cancel. meaning no remainder. Let's now bring down our variables, decrease them by one exponent. It wants us to find all the zeros. So what that means is we need to take our result here and we have to factor it. Number in front times number in back. These are the factors that can multiply to get -5 and can be combined to get -4. 1 minus 5 is -4. Since that leading coefficient is 1, we can save ourselves some time here. It wants us to find the zeros. So that means once you factored, set them equal to 0 and solve for x. Here you'd have to subtract 1. Here you'd have to, subtract 1. So that should be -1. Here you'd have to add 5. And don't forget the other 0 it gave us to help us solve this problem. So now we found all the zeros. -10, 5, and -1. Have a good day.